Right, and we're live. Welcome, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Coach Gerald Lami podcast. Again, thank you for everyone that's tuning in to these episodes. If you're finding them valuable, make sure you're sharing it with others. Like, comment, subscribe. Today, I've got another special guest. We're tapping into the sporting director roles in the football game. So more so behind the scenes. Today, I'm joined by Davidsen, who's sporting director at JAZIRA Football Club. Mads, thanks for coming on to the podcast.
Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. How you been during this time, during lockdown and things like that? How has it affected your work?
Yeah, it's obviously special times for us all. But I mean, right now, to be honest, it's not so unusual the way we work here in the UAE.
Mm-hmm.
It was more when I got this job I got in May last year, basically during COVID, and just when the club booked my flight ticket, the country was shut down, so I had to work remotely from Spain.
Mm-hmm.
The first month, which of course was very strange to start in a job only online, and I only met my colleagues online. So that was a special moment. But then we moved here and they got settled here, and now things are, I would say, as normal as you could during these times.
Mm-hmm. And are you getting used to the weather again? Because the weather in Spain is a little bit different to the Middle East.
Yeah, right now it's nice, as you probably know yourself. It's a good time now these months. With 26, 27 degrees right now, but obviously I came here 10th of June, so I got all the heat immediately. June, July, August. But I lived previously. I also lived in Guangzhou in South China, that has a tropical climate. So it's not so unusual for me to have these extreme conditions.
Mm-hmm. So let's touch into your journey a little bit, Mads, because to get to the role that you are at the moment, you have to have a lot of experience. You have to know, of course, in terms of the field. Talk us a little bit about the journey of how you got to the sporting director role at JAZIRA now.
Yeah, I mean, in the beginning, I stopped playing football when I was relatively young for several reasons. Mostly that I had an injury I couldn't get rid of in my groin and my hip. Mm-hmm. That affected me, so I couldn't play. Secondly, I wasn't a huge talent, so I would never had, as I normally say, I would never have played for Barcelona anyway. So that led me to start my studies, and I went to university. And then I was invited to do some youth coaching, which, to be honest, was not something I was considering. But then some people convinced me, and that led me into youth coaching. And I found out that first of all, I had a drive for it. I was motivated by developing players, developing young humans. And also I had flair for it. I could see my work had an impact on the kids. Mm-hmm. I could see the kids improve. And suddenly, you gain experience, you gain knowledge. I took a lot of all the educations you need. I traveled a lot abroad to gain insights from the best clubs across Europe. And then in 2012, I had a chance to go abroad. So I went to China to open a football academy. And that was my first job where you could say I also had management responsibility. Mm-hmm. Before that, I was just coaching. But this was the first time where suddenly I was responsible for a budget. I was responsible for the staff, for the setting up the structure. So that learned me that actually I'm probably better than that. I'm probably better at this than being a coach, to be honest. Mm-hmm. So that interests me. But then later on, I went back to coaching in China. I got into the professional clubs as an assistant coach and an analyzer, also doing some recruitment. So I've been lucky to cover a lot of areas in a football club. I've been basically I also been working in, actually when I was a student, I also worked in the marketing department in a football club. So I've seen a lot of the different departments. I was an analyst under Sven ERIKSSON in China. I've been assistant coach, been the head coach for basically all teams from under 11 to under 21. And then doing a lot of scouting, being responsible for the recruitment. So in some way you could say, like you said before, I probably just slowly gained some experience that could lead me into this role. But then I became technical director in a club in China called Shanghai SIPG. And that was, I think, my first real test. where we had to build up a club basically from scratch, and developing all the different departments, setting the strategy, implementing the style of play, maintaining the philosophy across different coaches, etc. So that was a really, really interesting journey. Those 4 years at Shanghai SIPG. Yeah. Then after that I decided to make my own company and consult clubs on a strategic level, because I think football clubs have a huge unfold potential in terms of the strategic work, especially the football strategic part. I mean, most clubs are quite good on the business strategic part, but they are weak, or I would say undecided on the football strategic part. So I set up a company, and I've been working with this for 1.5 years. And then suddenly, to be honest, this offer from JAZIRA came a little bit out of nothing. So in the end, decided to go for it, and it's been really good. Been here 9 months, and it's a really interesting project.
Oh, amazing journey there, Mads. Really, and again, like I said earlier on, to get to the position where you're at, you have to have a variety of knowledge in terms of what happens on the grass and off the grass as well. Is truly important. I think that's when you see a club really flourish under sporting director, because I've been around clubs, and people behind the scenes sometimes don't understand the grass, when I mean the coaching side of things, players, understanding people, because first and foremost, before the business, we're dealing with people here. We're not dealing with robots or anything like that. And I understand, the Dutch philosophy as well. I've done a few courses with the Johan Cruyff Foundation, and I love the Dutch philosophy in terms of different ways of working with people, interacting with people, getting the best out of people. And to get to Al Jazeera now in the Middle East, like we spoke a little bit off air, I've had my experience in the Middle East, and football is still developing, it's still getting there. So for you to get to where you are now, how has it been in terms of working in the Middle East? It's only been 9 months, but what differences have you seen from working in China to working in the Middle East at the moment?
Yeah, I think there is some similarities between China and the Middle East in terms of being, I think you called it also football development country. You can see that they are still young in terms of professional football.
Yep.
And even I'm from a small country, Denmark, where we only 5 million people. And but we're also quite young. I mean, professional football started not in the 80s in Denmark, so it's really not many years ago that we started to be professional. In the 70s in Denmark, there was only amateur football. Nothing was. We didn't pay salaries to anyone. And if you go to England, they have paid salaries for almost 100 years. So it's in some way it's logical that things are still under development here, because it's so new for them. And of course, why they have advantages in China and in the Middle East is because they have resources, they have investments, possibilities that we don't have in Denmark, for example. They have facilities that we cannot provide in a small country like Denmark. So this gives you a huge potential. So for me, it's just about adding in the knowledge now, adding in the newest methodologies, the newest football strategies, how to set up a club, how to run a club, how to analyze a club, how to evaluate your work, etc. From everything from style of play to methodology to academy to recruitment. So I mean, the area has huge potential. I was also a bit surprised about the level when I came here. To be honest, I've never been in the Middle East to watch football, but I've obviously seen a lot of Champions League games, because with Shanghai SIPG we played also 4 years in the Asian Champions League. So even we didn't face the west side of the teams. I always try to follow just to see the level when I saw teams from Iran or Saudi or UAE. So I've obviously seen games, and I have to say the technical level in particular is really high here. We really have some good technical players, where Chinese players maybe are a little bit more physical, they're a little bit faster, they're a little bit more full of stamina, strength and power players. Koreans the same, for example, very strong athletic players. But here we really have some skilled players technically. Mm-hmm. So I really see a big potential if we can manage to add in the things they need to learn, or maybe make the programs in the different age group. We need to update a little bit. So when I came here after 100 days, I said to the club in my first report that the hardware is in place, but we need to update the software.
Okay. I like that. I like the saying of that. So let's go a little bit back to your time in China, where you said you worked with Sven ERIKSSON. You know, this is arguably one of the best managers in history with what he's done with Lazio and etc. and other clubs. What valuable lessons did you learn working with someone like Sven?
Yeah, but I mean that is almost impossible to put in words, to be honest. And it's interesting actually. If I just I will get back to your question, but if I just elaborate on that, you know, you asked in the beginning, you said about gaining experience. Mm-hmm. So you could say for a relatively young guy like myself, coming from Denmark, that I worked since I went abroad. You know, I worked with Sven ERIKSSON, I worked with André Villas-Boas, I worked with Vitor Pereira. And now I work with Marcel Kaiser. So if you take their previous clubs, you will look at clubs like Sporting Lisbon, Porto, Ajax Amsterdam, England national team, Benfica, Lazio, Roma, Sampdoria, Zenit St. Petersburg, Chelsea, Tottenham, Fenerbahce, Olympiacos. So in some way, I'm being extremely lucky that I have learned from all of these people that has gained much more experience than I have. From different fields. So this has been a huge privilege, to be honest. That's been partly, I think, why I also developed my skills faster than maybe you could expect. But specifically Sven, I work very close with because I was part of his coaching staff for several years. And Sven is, I think what he learned me firstly was how extremely calm he is. I also know when he was coaching England that I spoke with some of the players. I met them once at a charity event in China, a few of them, Michael Owen and Paul Scholes and a few others. And they said the same thing. I think the English called Sven the ice mask because you couldn't see on his face whether if you won or you lost. And it's the same I saw. You know, we could win 5-0 and the next morning Sven would say good morning to everyone and he would sit down and start his work. And then we lost 5-0 and he would come in and say good morning and start doing his work. You know, there was no change in his behavior. You couldn't feel that he was grumpy. You couldn't also not feel he was over exaggerated with emotions or he was too excited. And I really like that calm, analytic approach. No matter if it goes well or it goes bad, I really think it reflected on the players that the dressing room was always calm. So that was really something I learned on a leadership perspective. And then I could add in different aspects from all the coaches from a more on a coaching side of view, where Sven was good at one part, Andrea was good at another part, Vitor was good at a third part, and Marcel Kaiser here in JAZIRA was good at a fourth, because they all have different skill sets, of course. So for me, it's just very interesting to have seen four top coaches working closely with them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, amazing stuff. So, you know, for any young aspiring coaches that are probably coming up in the game, or, you know, sporting directors in a role at the moment, what would you recommend for them when they work with other people? Because like you said, you've worked with some of the best coaches or managers, you know, world football has to offer. How does someone learn from these people? Is it a thing where you just observe, you know, you kind of write things down and you add it to your own attributes? What's the best technique for these young coaches to kind of learn from, you know, some older coaches or more experienced coaches?
Yeah, ask first of all. I know especially towards Sven, I know sometimes I think I almost annoyed him with all my questions. but to be honest, you have to, because at least for myself, I'm as a person, I'm very curious. Yeah. So I simply had a lot of questions. You know, not because I was doubting anything. I just had to know why do you do this? Why don't you choose this exercise? Or why do you do videos 2 days before, not 3 days before? Whatever it can be, because with their experience, there's always an argument why. Mm-hmm. then you can decide if you agree or not. But you have to learn from them why they're doing what they're doing. And then I still think that every young coach or young person going into football is, you just have to have an open mindset and a growth mindset. I think the theory mentioned the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset.
Yeah.
And it's very important, because that will give you, for example, did I agree with everything that Sven does? No, not at all. But I had, at least in the period I worked with him, I had of course to be 100% loyal to his work, because that's also an important thing. You have to show loyalty. You also have to show discipline. I simply just try to work extremely hard. So that's another thing. I mean, try to write down everything you see, and then you can always, after a while, you will have so much empirical stuff in your folders that you can start to put it together. You can start to say, haha, I don't agree with this, but I really like this. So suddenly you will start to design your own, whatever it is, style of play, or your own football club mythology, or how you think you should set it up. So it's it's all about grabbing in as much as you can. Traveling. I've when I was a young coach, I spent all my money on traveling to visit clubs, to stay in shitty hotels, to be honest, and spending 2 hours on getting with a bus to some kind of training ground just to see a training or to discuss with some coach. So these kind of things, I think you have to try these kind of things to also. Now I'm in a better position. Yes, I'm financially in a different position. Yes, but it took 10 years, of work, and I don't like the word sacrificing, because I don't think I sacrificed anything, because I wanted to do it. But sometimes I sense, to be honest, young coaches write to me that they want to go abroad. They ask a little bit like you do. How can I do that? How can I gain? Mm-hmm. But my feeling is sometimes that they want to achieve too fast.
Yes.
That they think that they can get a job tomorrow with no experience, or they ask for a high salary from the beginning, for example, which I don't. Of course, if they succeed doing it, congratulations to them. But I don't think it's very realistic, and I don't think it's the right approach. When I was youth coaching in Denmark 1 year, I was coaching in under 13 team, mm-hmm. and that group had divided into an A and a B group, and I didn't like that, so I told the club I want to train all the players together, and I want to coach both teams in the league, so I make sure that there's an equal setup for both teams. Mm-hmm. And the club allowed me, so I was training something like 40-45 players, and coaching both teams. So it was a 7 day a week job with training and matches, and I was traveling in Copenhagen with a big bag full of balls and cones into the train, and I took the train because I couldn't afford a car, so I was in the train, driving back and forward between walking 2 kilometers from the train station to the club we were playing against, or whatever it was, and it's not because I'm some kind of hero or anything, but it gave me a good sign that I really want. Yes, and I really wanted this, because, to be honest, it was cold, it was rainy, it was dark, and I was standing at that train station alone sometimes, and you're thinking, why do you do this? But if you do it, it's really because you want to do it, mm-hmm. because you want to achieve something, not only for yourself, also on behalf of the players, of course. So I think that's a good foundation to have now when you are in a more settled position. So I think it's important advice to say, stay patient, and work your way up. Don't try to jump on the ladder. Mm-hmm. Take it step by step, and accept that in the beginning. For example, when I went to China, my salary was so low, not low. I signed the contract, so of course I was satisfied with that. But we had 1 year where I couldn't come home for Christmas because I couldn't afford a flight ticket.
Wow.
But it was fine. That was a decision I took, and my girlfriend went with me, and we took that decision together. And of course now we can afford to fly home. But I think it was good for us to try that period of our life.
Oh, for sure. Do you know, when you spoke about, just a little bit of journeys, it brought back memories, because similar to you, You know, I was working in London, in inner city London, in Hackney, and it's, you know, you don't get paid a lot, and what you do have, it's a lot of use with a lot of baggage on them in terms of, you know, financial problems, at home problems and things like this, and you're having to travel. I remember at that time I had a small smart car. I'm not too sure if you know about the small smart cars, and I would just fill up the smart car with footballs and equipment and everything like that. There was no space, literally. The smart car is small anyway. And it's like you're going to different places, it's late, it's cold, and there'll be times where for the first 8 months, it was all voluntary. I was not getting paid for this. And there was times where I said to myself, what are you doing? Like, you know, do you really want to do this? But seeing a difference in the youths in terms of like behavior, skill set, footballing ability is very rewarding. That was the thing that kept me going, to the point where, you know, I went abroad and done similar things to you, you know, where financially I got into a better place. But it's the rewarding part. It's if you really want it, you're gonna do it. And this is something that I always tell to young coaches anyway that are coming up in the game. And like you said, these young coaches, or not even young coaches, in life, the society that we're in at the moment, everything has to be instant. Where you can order a, a takeaway and it will come in the next half an hour. You know, you can order anything from Amazon, it will come next day delivery. So it's like life is becoming so instant that when it comes down to hard work, it's kind of gone out the window. The patience as well. You said it's taking you 10 years to where you are now. You know, it's a long road if you want to get to the position that, you know, being a sporting director or any sort of position in a higher capacity. But let's touch on it on a technical point of view, because you spoke about methodology, and we hear a lot about methodology and clubs speaking about, oh, this is our methodology, etc. In terms of methodology, how do you create a methodology in terms of working in a team environment?
Yeah, I start in a different place, to be honest, because for me, a club first have to describe their football philosophies. That will be in a more headline-based level. I actually just wrote a book about this, how to design a football strategy.
Okay.
It's still only in Danish, but in the coming month we will translate it into English. So I can hopefully have some people want to read that. But that's actually exactly what I try to do there. I describe how a football club should be built, and how you describe a football strategy. And you always start with the football philosophy, because that will define the club's work over a decade or more. And then you move into the style of play. Then you go in and design based on the football philosophy. You choose what exactly is the style of play. And now we're down to the phases of the game. How many phases do you wish to work with within your club, and how do you define those phases? What is important? What kind of player profiles do you need? And then after that, you define your methodology. Then you define how do we need to work to achieve this? What kind of exercises, what kind of age group related training should we design? How do we have a loan strategy for young players? Do we have a transition strategy for the play? All of this is for me part of the methodology. But for me personal, I'm very affected by my work with the Portuguese coaches. They learned me a lot, to be honest. They opened my eyes a little bit towards what methodology can be on a different level, I would say. Yes. And if you, for example, my Bible in terms of methodology is the book Football Complex, which is also based on the Victor Frade and these people's thinking about. I think the Portuguese were the first to combine their coaching related educations with the universities.
Okay.
And that's why for me they are a little bit ahead of the rest of the world right now. That's also why you see a huge impact these years for Portuguese coaches in Europe, and also not only in Europe, in the world, especially compared to that there are only 9 million people in Portugal, so it's a relatively small country. But they have a huge effect if you look around. I think they are the country, if I remember correct, they are the country with the most coaches in the top 5 leagues.
Okay.
except the local coach, of course. I mean, of course, Italy has most Italian coaches. So the next, despite the local coaches, I think if I remember correct, I saw last time the Portuguese are number one in the world in terms of having coaches in England, in Spain, in Germany, in France, in Italy. And for me, that's no surprise because I've followed their education quite closely. And I know a lot of people down there. I've been visiting Portugal many times, Benfica in particular. So for me, that is really where they taught me how detailed a methodology can be, but also they work in a different way than most football clubs, where they say, I cannot explain the whole book, of course, but but if I keep it simple, I would say the main theory is that everything in a methodology, every exercise, every work, every periodization has to have a tactical impact. And I think that in some ways sounds logical to us, but actually if you think back at how we normally have worked, especially for example in Denmark or in England, where I've also been a lot, we actually often work from a physical perspective. We work that the players need this kind of loading for this kind of training. And then after that, we design the exercise. But the Portuguese turn it around and they say, no. We want to work with, for example, our transition today. That is our tactical periodization. And then later on, you can add in the physical, of course, saying, how much should the players run today? Okay, we limit the space, for example, so they don't need to sprint 30 meters. They only sprint 20 meters in the transition, as an example. So the Portuguese has, for me, taking the methodology to another level. And that is, if people are sitting out there, they should definitely read Football Complex, which for me is, that is my Bible in terms of methodology.
Amazing stuff. No, definitely in terms of the Portuguese, we've seen for years the Jose Mourinho's. What's your take on Jose Mourinho at the moment? Because he does take a lot of criticism from people in terms of his playing style and things like that. But for me, the guy's a born winner. Wherever he's gone, he's won trophies. His style is questionable in terms of your preference, but in terms of you, what's your take on people's criticism towards Jose?
Well, I mean, actually, we use Tottenham as an example in my book. So hopefully soon you can read about that.
Amazing.
But I think that there are so many layers in this discussion. I think that what we try to describe in our book is when a football club should define their philosophy, they should make sure it never changes. Mm-hmm. They should not let the manager decide how he wants to play, because then we are in a dangerous position, because we're depending on one person. And I think without answering if I like his style of play or not, because for me that's a fan perspective.
Yeah.
Then I would say that Tottenham has. I mean, I visited Tottenham. I lived 1 year in London in 2019 when I set up my company there, and I was a lot of times at the Tottenham training ground to watch training or watch youth games. And everywhere you walk around this fantastic complex, it says, "To dare is to do," and that is the Tottenham slogan or motto, or however you say it. And that's something they have lived with for many years. And also when I went to White Hart Lane in the old days, I went to Wembley when they played there recently. I also been to the new stadium a few times already. It is a club that is built on playing what I would say attacking football. That to dare is to do. In this motto that lies something that we take chances. And that for me there's nothing about if it was Jose Mourinho or someone else or whoever they picked as a coach, that for me not so interesting. But I think they have jeopardized their own football philosophy by changing to something else. And I don't have the empirical study from all Tottenham fans, but even when it went well in the beginning of the season, I sense from the people I know who support Tottenham that they still didn't like it. And that's the whole point. If a club goes against its own history, its own identity, its own fan-based relationship, no matter how many games you win, you will not succeed, because you will never have a long-term sustainable model. So I think that's where Tottenham probably have, to be honest, maybe failed a little bit from a management perspective in terms of going against their own history and their own identity. And history will tell you that Very rarely that goes well.
No, for sure, definitely. And speaking about sustainable models as well in terms of clubs, if we go to the other side of North London, I'm an Arsenal fan. You know, to see what Arsene Wenger built in terms of building a sustainable club where the club was running by itself in terms of finances and things like that. You know, and we've seen the decline of Arsenal in terms of, you know, other clubs are spending a little bit more, etc. Is there a time where you kind of revisit the model of the club and you ask, you know, how can we change it? Are we up to times? You know, you can still have your motto of the club, but when is the time to kind of overview the model, and is it still working in 2021 sort of thing? You know, in your opinion?
No, but you should do that every 6 months. You know, we are constantly evaluating our style of play here. For example, in our club, is it
Mm,
we're doing it on a two based analysis. First of all, the internal one, we find the underlying data that can tell us if we have progressed, if the team is if the team have basically if the coach's training is coming into the games.
hmm.
That you can measure on. That depends on your style of play, of course, but you can measure it on certain areas. They could be simple one, expected goals for and against, which would give you an indication: are you better at producing chances than 6 months ago or not? Because that will tell you a little bit about the training effect.
Hmm.
It could also be, if you are a high pressing team, it could also be on the PBDA. Are you winning more balls high or not? Because if you just write in your football philosophy, we are a high pressing team, but your coach, the way he works with the players is not having an effect on the games. You know, then you have to question: is it the style of play that needs to be refined, or is it simply the coach that is not doing the right job? That is for
Hmm.
me how you do it internally. Then we also do it externally. I just sit with this actually the other day here in JAZIRA. We looked at we try to benchmark towards the top teams in Europe and the teams who win titles. You know, how do they play? Where's football moving? Which kind of trends do we see in international football? What do we see in the week? That could be, you can read the Champions League report. You can do measurements across the most winning clubs, saying how do they play? What is it that makes them successful, other than just having the best players?
Yeah.
but but that's so these kind of parameters we try to constantly look at. But that goes back to one very important point I think you made in the beginning. And of course, I'm biased when I say this because I fit into that description myself. But I think today, football management teams, sporting directors, whatever they are, there's too many clubs where they have people there who don't understand the work on the pitch.
Yes.
They don't have any experience themselves having working with a team. They don't have any experience themselves working with players, developing players. They have never designed a style of play. They never described a style of play. They never tried to implement the style of play. They never described the methodology. They don't know how difficult it is to put a methodology concrete, specific into an exercise. This is, you know that yourself. It's very, very difficult. And then actually getting the players to understand it too. then we are really down to almost science. And I see this in many clubs, that if you don't have this knowledge, then how can you question your own work? How can you judge the coach? Well, there's only one parameter left: results.
Hmm.
And for me, results are one of the worst indicators to measure on future success. But of course, if you don't understand the underlying parameters, you have to go with results.
Yep. And we're living in a day of stats, you know, where it's everything is based on stats. You know, I think when it comes down to stats, you have to take it into context. So, you know, how these stats came about, etc. And you know, like you said, it's a very results based business now, where we've seen managers, you know, after 3, 4 games, 5 games, a month, 2 months, 3 months, if the results aren't going the right way, they're going to get the sack. What's your take on, in terms of, again, like you said, it's kind of a thin line when we're talking about results. What's your take on, owners making those decisions straight away? Do we see a long-term sustainable club if, you know, owners are doing things like that?
No, definitely not. I mean, when I had my company, I had a little team who helped me do some work and some analytical research, and we made one bigger survey that showed that across the top 5 leagues, so England, Spain, Italy, Germany, France, 75% of the clubs do not have a sustainable model.
Mm-hmm.
That means that the clubs change the coach within maximum 1.5 years time, and the new coach will have full power on how the team plays, who the team recruit, who the team sells, if you want to use academy players or not. So we simply measured every time there was a change of a coach, does the style of play change? Does the recruitment change massively? Is there a change also in the academy players going into the team or not? And we could see in 75% of the cases, it changed.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, you could definitely say that it will never be sustainable. They will find one day a lucky punch, to be honest, to find the right coach that will last 3-4 years and they will have sporting success. But it's not sustainable because it's based on one person's work, and that's a very, very vulnerable model. So what I try to do with my company, and the same why I'm hired to do the job here, is to build a club-defined model where we hire a coach that can fulfill our style of play and our philosophy, you know, and that should, for me, make much more sense, first of all, in terms of having a long-term plan that doesn't change even the coach change. And also it will actually be easier to recruit a coach, because when we know how we play, there's only a limited amount of coaches that can fulfill that job. So even our coaching recruitment becomes more narrow, definitely, but also a little bit easier, because sometimes I see clubs where, let's say, 2 names are mentioned as the potential coaches, but these 2 coaches are completely different. They have completely different style of plays. They have completely different methodologies. They probably work very different in terms of recruitment and so on. So it's for me, very, I would say I don't understand how you can end up with 2 so different coaches. But that's, again, because you haven't understood the internal work on the pitch, basically.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. No, 100%. And in terms of speaking about, you know, managers coming in and out the door, I've seen some clubs, when it comes down to the academy football, you know, if there's a certain manager that comes in and he plays in a certain style or plays a certain formation, I've seen them drastically change the whole academy philosophy again, in terms of, like, if a manager comes in and he plays a 3-5-2, I've seen the under 13s playing a 3-5-2, which to me, it makes no sense in terms of doing that, because we're just confusing the youths, because it's like the first team manager changes, the whole philosophy changes again. And like you said, if a club has a model, we should stick to that model, no matter what manager comes in. What's your take on, you know, the academies drastically changing in terms of, just the system that they're playing as soon as a new manager comes in?
I don't think, just to be clear on that, I don't like the discussion based on systems, because
Mm-hmm.
that's, for me, a very, very fluent. Because if you go back to, I think, the old definition of a system, it's something that takes that characterize a team without the ball. Just to be clear. So that means when you say a team play 4-3-3, that should mean that when the opponent's goalkeeper have the ball and he plays it out, there will be 3 players on the first line for the opponent. There will be 3 players on the second line. There will be 4 on the last line. Because especially in possession, I mean, you have a winger now. Most wingers move inside. You have a fullback coming on the outside. You have a 9 coming down as a false 9. You have maybe a 10 going deep. So what do you call this system? I don't know how to count, to be honest. So I totally agree with what you're saying, but I'm more based on the football philosophy and the style of play.
Mm-hmm.
That you're absolutely right. The clubs make very short-term thinking when they give that kind of mandate to the coach. You know, that imagine giving a guy so much power that the work of the last 10 years is more or less put on hold, or in worst case destroyed. I've seen that also a little bit, not so dramatical, but when I was consulting a club the last years, and I could see they got a foreign coach in, and he was very, let's say, determined how he wanted to play, and suddenly he played without wingers. And before he came in, this club had I would say a 4, 5, 6 years track with a FC Barcelona methodology coach that designed the back to the wide wingers, 3 on the first line always. So suddenly you have developed for 6 years wingers, and then you hire a head coach for the first team that say, I don't play with wingers. And at the same time, you write in your strategy that you're depending on your homegrown players. So there was some, if you put that into a mathematical sentence, I don't think we can find an answer. So this is where the board, the owners, simply are not football-wise educated enough to understand this bigger picture.
No, for sure. And fast forward to where you are today in terms of, working in the Middle East. How far do you see, football developing in that region? The World Cup's coming to Qatar and next year. How far do you see this, football developing in that region?
No, I think they're still, like you said, a football development country. That's quite obvious. But I also see, I think the issue here is the player pool is not so big. That is, for example, one thing I always said in China, where I said when I discussed football with the federation, or I went to some seminars and gave a presentation, I always said to them, you have to use your amazing advantage, and that is you are 1.4 billion people. Yeah. I'm from a country with 5 million people, so no matter what we do, if you put your training and your development of players on the same level as us, you're gonna smash us because we cannot do anything. But right now we do it better than you, and that's why we can beat you. So a country like China has this kind of advantage, where here you are a relatively small population, so you don't have the numbers, and that means you have to be even more detailed with what you have. And I think the federation now has taken some steps in terms of looking at how to centralize, for example, the youngest training as a extra curriculum for the most talented players. These kind of small initiatives you shouldn't underestimate when you're thinking 3-5 years ahead. It's the same we did in Denmark some years ago. Also tried to centralize a little bit more without taking the players away from their normal clubs, but just offering them more elite training. And I think we see an effect of it after 3-5 years. So I think it's an interesting area to follow. Also, with, like I said before, I really like the technical foundation in this region. It reminds me a little bit of the difference between me growing up in Denmark, North Europe, and then moving to Spain, South Europe. It's a little bit the same. I see in Denmark much more physicality, much more. Much less technical work than compared to Spain, for example. Maybe also because of the temperature, the climate, and it's a little bit the same here. It's a lot of technical abilities in this region.
No, for sure. Definitely. Again, from my experience, I can vouch what you're saying in terms of the technical ability, in terms of coaches. I think there needs to be a little bit more education on that side of things. But again, it's a developing country, as we said. But Mads, last question for you, something that I always like to ask my guests, which I think is an important question, because it's for me, reflecting, it's a way to kind of develop and to kind of overview what's been happening and how you can move on. So the question is, what is the best lesson you've learned in the last 6 months?
That was a good question. It's a good question. Yeah, that is actually difficult to just find that, because I mean, to be honest, my last 9 months I know many people have had a bad 2020 because of COVID and all that, but to be honest, our 2020 was very hectic because we moved continent and we had a child, and so
wow. He was busy.
A lot of things happened. I wrote a book. I had a book published as well, so it's been actually quite quite hectic year. But I think again, what I've experienced here is how much culture affects whatever kind of strategy you come in with. This was also my learning in China. I cannot just copy my work in Denmark, my exercise in Denmark, and then come to China and say we do it exactly like this because I know it's working.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's the same here in the Middle East. You have to adapt. That's something I really learned in my almost 7 years in China, that you have to adapt to succeed. That doesn't mean you don't have to bring anything, because of course you also brought here because of your know-how and your experience. But the culture you really have to try to get under the skin with the culture. And again, I think good ideas is to ask a lot. And I had a good I don't know if I would call it a lesson, but I had a good talk some time ago here with our CEO about culture and how the region works in terms of management and communication and stuff like that. So these kind of things I'm always very open to understand, because otherwise I think I have no chance of succeeding here without understanding and respecting and adapting to the culture.
Amazing. Well, I think that's a nice way to kind of wrap it up, Mads. Honestly, from the short conversation, I feel like my creative juices are flowing, and I wanna do a lot more research in terms of the culture. I'm quite inquisitive myself, and I'm currently reading a book. It's called The Mixer. In terms of the different formation, different philosophies that has happened throughout the years in the Premier League, which is an interesting book at the moment. So, like yourself,
I read that one as part of my research to my own book. Actually.
Oh, there you go. So I've only just started the other day, and again, it's interesting to see how football develops, and it develops very, very quick. It doesn't hold. It's not a slow development. It happens quick. However, there's been a lot of like we said earlier, maybe not styles, but philosophies, etc., that have kind of been remixed. It's kind of the same thing, but it's been remixed. And that, for instance, now we're seeing Pep Guardiola. He hasn't got a striker at the moment, and he's still scoring goals. He hasn't got an out and out number 9, a classic number 9. We've seen João Cancelo, who's, I don't know what position this guy is playing today. Is he a fullback? Is he playing center midfield? Is he playing on a wing? Which, people like Pep are always developing. So, to hear you speak the way you're speaking in terms of, understanding the culture first before you can go in and implement your own philosophies is important. So I really appreciate your time, Mads, and sharing your knowledge. I'm sure we can speak hours and hours about football. With your book as well, once it's converted to English, we'll definitely promote that on the channel, across the social media platforms as well. I'll be sure to get that book as well, to read it, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of gems in there. So Mads,
I will make sure I send one for you.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mads. I'm looking forward to reading the book, and I wish you the best of luck. Hopefully we'll meet up soon as well in sunny Dubai. And yeah, best of luck for the rest of the season.
Cheers. You're welcome here anytime.
Thank you, Mads.